What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joe and May Larry. So I know I haven't really done too many episodes as of late, but in this one, it's a very special episode. I have my buddy Brendan Murray coming on the podcast, my former teammate in high school baseball, and my good friend ever since. Excited to have him on the podcast today. He knows a lot about Boston sports and sports in general. We're going to talk a lot about the Bruins to start out, talk about the NHL playoffs and where things currently stand, and then talk about the 7 games today in the NBA. We got the Pacers and the Knicks at 3:30. And then the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves playing at 8 o'clock tonight. 2 games I'm definitely excited to watch. So Brendan will be on in just a second. Thank you guys for listening as always, and hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you. So here I am with my buddy Brendan Murray. How are we doing, Brendan?
I'm doing good. You?
Doing well, brother. Thank you for taking the time for coming on. Much appreciated. It's been a while. Me and you've been trying to figure out a time to get you on the podcast, so we finally found the time after probably a year or so of trying to find a date. But hey, here we are. Great time for sports. Obviously, tough time to be a Boston sports fan if you're looking at the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Patriots as well, even though we're in the offseason. But if you look at the Celtics, things are looking up there at least. So we'll start out with probably talking some Bruins to start out. Tough series against Florida. It just seems like they always have the Bruins number. So we'll start out with that series. What did you see in that series? Which obviously the Bruins, the physicality was up in that series, knowing you were going to play a physical team like Florida. I knew the Bruins were going to have to play physical and be hitting a lot, obviously, so it was going to be a bruising series. Obviously, we saw some injuries happen as well. Obviously, Marchand going down with an injury was tough. McAvoy obviously had a black eye. There were a lot of things going on in this series, but obviously a tough break for the Bees. What did you see this series?
I just saw a lot of, I think they were obviously physical, as you said, but I think they kind of got trapped into the Panthers game of just getting too physical and taking a lot of dumb penalties as a result. Put them on the power play. I mean, Jeremy Swayman did obviously amazing, but he can't stop everything when the players aren't really helping him out. I mean, you got outshot every single game basically, but 2 and 3, they were like double the amount of shots. I mean, you got to protect home ice. I mean, you don't want a single game at home ice. I don't think we've beaten the Panthers in the playoffs at home since game 1 of last year. Mm-hmm. So every single time it's just like you got to protect home ice. They feed off of our energy more than we do. That's a problem.
You got it right. 2-5 at home in the playoffs this year. The Bruins were, and then since last year, so last year and this year, 3-8 at home. 3-8. So yeah, that's a real problem, like you said. I know some teams get up for the road games. So I know the Bruins have had success on the road. I get that, but you should protect home ice. Just like the Patriots always. Whenever you play the Patriots at Gillette with Brady, they were always going to win. You know what I mean? That's a big advantage when you play at home. It seems like for the Bruins, they would rather play on the road, which I don't really get necessarily. I understand some teams are different. They like playing on the road, like I said. But protecting home ice is very important, especially when the Bruins last year were as good as they were, being a high seed, obviously being the best team, in the regular season for, a historical season overall, and just falling apart at the TD Garden last year was tough. And then this year as well. I mean, that Toronto series, I was happy they got out of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I thought they were losing. At the series start, I said they were losing 7. But if you look at that Florida team, like you said, they played very physical, which was one thing that the Bruins probably got a little bit too much involved in the hitting. But also, I feel like they just get in the Bruins' heads, not even just the physicality-wise, just the Bruins it seems like they're not playing their game, they're playing Florida's game, like you said. Mm-hmm. And do you think that's because of Tkachuk getting in the Bruins' heads, or is it just the Bruins not really playing their game, they're just wanting to play Florida's game? What would you say?
I think, as you said, Tkachuk's obviously a big factor in it, and then also Sam Bennett, as you saw this series, was obviously insane with obviously a punch, and then gets the goalie interference the next game where just really shifts the momentum. And then I also think a big part of it is Paul Maurice himself. He's just guy's got blood vessels every single game, like popping out of his head, screaming at the team. Yeah. Where Jim Montgomery doesn't really have that where he can just tear the players apart and kind of go after them, where I think you kind of need that with the physical team.
Definitely. Yeah, it feels like the Bruins just weren't really, in the series locked in. And I feel like that was the thing last year. The Bruins let Florida get in their heads, so they just wanted to hit Florida, just like this series, I guess, especially early on in the series, that game 2 game it was when the Bruins had, all those fights in the third period and all those guys rejected. I know a lot of people said, the Pastrnak fight was great for the Bruins to get momentum. First off, you don't want to get Pastrnak hurt in that situation, so that was a risk. Secondly, I think it gave Florida momentum because the Bruins obviously lost that game 6-1. They completely gave up and just wanted to fight. I think that momentum shifted to Florida. And would you say that was a turning point? I know it was early in the series, so it's hard to say a turning point in Game 2, but that was definitely a momentum swinger in my eyes.
I mean, I definitely see that, but I think more even Game 3. Games 1 and 2 were very even, where it's like 5-1 on our side first game, then 6-1 them. So It's like, all right, could kind of go either way. Then next game they do the same thing, like 6-2, and I'm like, on our own ice, where it's kind of like, all right, you can't do that. It's like you just did that 2 games straight where you got outshot double and you'll have 5+ goals both games. It's like, can't do that.
100%. 100%. I think that Game 2 is just a tough stretch for the Bruins. Like, obviously, the score-wise was bad, but I felt like if you can win that first game and then have a close Game 2, momentum would be in the Bruins' favor. Losing 6-1, flip the momentum completely back to Florida. Yeah. And then, obviously, we've seen Florida manipulate the Bruins at the TD Garden, like we already noted. So that was a problem, but I wouldn't blame Jeremy Swayman. That last goal he gave up,
definitely not.
You really can't see that puck coming there.
Screened, yeah.
It went between, was it Wotherspoon's legs?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not. I wouldn't blame him for that. But if you had to pick one thing, one problem, whether it's a player, whether it's Montgomery, what was the issue for the Bruins in this series? I would go with, first off, discipline. I was going to say that, and then the too many men on ice the entire playoffs, not just this series.
7, I think.
Dude. It was ridiculous. It was like every other shift, it felt like. It was nuts.
Yeah, at least like one a game, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. So those are big mental mistakes. You can make mistakes on the ice where you have a bad pass and it gets deflected, stuff like that, or there's a screen where you can't see the puck, the goalie lets up a goal. That happens. Mm-hmm. But you're inflicting your own pain by, putting extra guys on the ice, hitting late, obviously getting all those roughing penalties and stuff.
Yeah.
It's brutal. What would you say the number one thing? Discipline was the problem for the Bees this series?
Yeah, as we said, I mean, just too many penalties. It's like you can't give them 6 power plays a game about. It's just like I think they probably had over 20 in the series. It's like just too many.
I would agree with you. I think this series too, the penalties were just ridiculous. How many power plays they had, which we talked about the interference, or I guess the non-interference call with Sam Bennett, obviously hitting Swayman there. And honestly, that goal was a big goal because obviously the Bruins challenged that play, and this was Game 5, right?
4.
Or was it Game 4? Yes, Game 4. So the Bruins challenged that, obviously, end up losing, and then they get a power play. So that's just a big momentum shifter, and I thought it should have been at least something, whether it's an interference, something should have been there. A back, what do you call it? Back check, it was something. It was something there. But obviously they didn't call it, and it was a cross-check, I thought. Could have been a cross-check, obviously, in the back. And what player was that? Was that...
That was Coyle.
Coyle? Yeah, okay, it was Coyle. Yeah, so I thought it could have been, obviously that. Hitting him in the back, obviously, with that. That could have been a cross-check, or even an interference call there. But the Bruins didn't get lucky there, and having it be a big momentum shifter in a game where the Bruins had to win, obviously, to try to make it 2-2 and try to have it be a new series... that was tough, but what do you think of the referees in the series overall? I would agree. I thought there were some questionable calls against the Bruins. I guess Florida had their questionable calls as well. It went both ways, but I thought the Bruins had some unfortunate calls more than Florida did. What did you see?
Yeah, so the rules analyst from ESPN came on, and he said he was saying that basically, kind of whatever they kind of call on the ice is basically going to stand, because he was saying on that Bennett call, the referee in back is looking for the puck the whole time. The one behind the net is looking for the puck the whole time. He's not really paying attention to what's happening with...
Yeah, so obviously there's the one behind the net. He's not really looking at the players as much, and he's more looking for the puck. And then there's the one out by the blue line who is obviously screened by a bunch of players and can't even see what's really going on at all. So... And then the question obviously becomes, is conclusive? Can it be overturned? If the goalie interference hadn't occurred, would he have still been able to save the puck after the fact? And that's kind of what it came down to, I guess. But basically what he was saying, if it's called in the moment, then that's going to stand. All right, then there's not enough to overturn and say it's not goalie interference because they called it on the ice, and clearly by the replay you can see it probably should have been called.
Definitely. I feel like a lot of the time referees don't ever want to reverse a call on the ice because that makes them look bad and you're pointing out they made a mistake. I think that's why a lot of time you don't see challenges, especially if it's not conclusive.
Yeah.
You don't see challenges ever flip, and that was obviously a big momentum shifter there. But if you look at these scores of these games, especially early on, like you said, the Bruins dominated Game 1, got killed in Game 2, obviously 6-1. They got dominated in Game 3 by Florida, and then had a lot of close games, 3 in a row. So the first 3 were blowouts. The last 3 games, 3-2, 2-1, and 2-1, all one-goal games. And obviously the Bruins only won one of those. But that Game 4 was huge. That's a one-goal game, like you said, and it ends up being a huge call. A huge call.
In the series, yep.
And that's the problem. If the Bruins win that game, it's 2-2. Going back to Florida, where the Bruins obviously won Game 5, who knows? If that's a 2-2 series and then the Bruins win Game 5 in Florida, we're probably having a much different conversation right now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's just the way things go. One call can definitely shift things. You know what I mean?
With the series.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It ruined, I feel like it did ruin the momentum for the Bees, you know, especially after the Bruins found a way to win one game in Florida and then losing 3 in a row was just brutal. If they won Game 4 and it was 2-2 after, you know, the first 4, I think the Bruins and their fans, everyone would be happy with that if it's 2-2. You know, but Florida's a good team. I feel like their roster is probably better than the Bruins overall. The Bruins have a better goalie, but Omark and Swayman, I think both are better than Bobrovsky. Even though Bobrovsky has had his moments against the Bees.
Definitely.
And he was obviously solid the last few games of the series. But I would say the Bruins have a better goalie, but center-wise, that was a problem all year for the Bees.
Yeah.
Florida dominates there against them.
In the playoffs, yeah.
Exactly. And what would you say? So now we can look to the offseason here. What is the number one thing the Bruins need to do this offseason? There's a lot of questions. Sign Jake DeBrusk, trade Omark, give Swayman obviously the contract that he needs. What would you say is the number one thing the Bruins have to do this offseason?
I mean, I think, trade Omark is obviously a big one up there. I mean, he's obviously a very valuable goaltender. Probably both of them, Swayman and Ullmark, are probably top 5 in the league, if anything. I mean, if top 10, if worst case. But I mean, yeah, you can definitely get a lot from trading a guy like Ullmark, and then maybe keep obviously the top 2 defensemen. I think keep Carlo McAvoy, but there's some of that bottom 4. I don't know. They're a little slow, a little old. I feel like. I mean, I hate to say Grislick, but his dad works at the Garden. Obviously, it's tough. I mean, to trade him, but I don't know.
I would agree with you. I agree with you on that. I think the defensemen definitely need, they need to at least address that somewhat. I know Lindholm, the Bruins made that big trade, and he wasn't great the last 2 playoffs. This year, he had a couple moments. That play against Toronto, his goal was obviously huge in that Game 7. Then the pass to Pastrnak off the boards, that was awesome. And then this series, he was okay. He wasn't he didn't stand out necessarily. He was okay. He had 1 goal, 3 assists in the playoffs overall, 4 points. But I feel like a lot of the time with him, and even McAvoy, which McAvoy has a lot of a burden on him. He has to basically carry, a lot of time when he is on the ice defensively, he has to carry the whole team defensively. So that's a problem. I think McAvoy, when you look at his numbers, -4, that's one thing people could look at and try to say, well, he wasn't great in the playoffs overall. But I think the problem is, I think they put a lot on his shoulders. A lot of the defense, it's all on him to break up, obviously, the puck in front of the net, obviously kill penalties. Obviously, that's a huge thing that McAvoy has to do. And I've been critical of McAvoy because I think he should be better in the playoffs. And then this playoffs is when I realized he has so much on him. The whole team needs him defensively. If you watched the Game 5 where the Bruins won, that last minute and a half, it was ridiculous the amount of pucks that he hit out of the zone. 2 or 3, diving, going to his left, going to his right, going back. He was doing everything possible for the Bruins to win that game. And I think with Lindholm, the expectations are high, but not as high, obviously, as McAvoy. But I think you need more out of those guys regardless. I am critical of McAvoy, but I do also acknowledge, as I said, his expectations are very high. You need a lot out of him. So it's tough, obviously, to obviously produce at that level always. But I would say the center position is the number one need in my eyes, which I get defense is definitely a need. But I think the center, you got to address. I don't know how they're going to do it because obviously the cap space really doesn't come into play until I think it's next offseason, right, when they have a lot more cap space. But I think the center position, which if you trade Omar, what is your best return? I'm not saying you have to say a player, but would you say a center you want?
I think, honestly, thinking of that now with centers, I mean, look at a team like Vegas. Vegas, I don't know if you saw this offseason, they had a lot of they put a lot of players on the long-term IR, went out and acquired a bunch of players. They have 4 insane, pretty great centers. So and obviously they've had their issues with gold. Obviously they won it last year, but they were flipping through in their 7-game series with Dallas. They were flipping through, so I could see maybe trading Olmark up to Vegas, get a center, a valuable center in return.
Definitely, yeah. I think with Dallas, Dallas was great. They've surprised me a lot, and then Vegas even. Like I thought Vegas was going to beat them, but I thought it was going to be like a 7-game series, which obviously it was a great series overall. But I don't know what it is about that Dallas team. Like they figure things out, especially when I've watched them, which I don't watch too many games during the regular season. So I underestimated them. I'll be honest. I was a little bit critical of them. I thought Vegas would be better just because they had the experience winning last year. Obviously, goaltending is a big part of the game, though, which, like you noted, Vegas has the depth, but obviously goalie isn't their strong suit. But Dallas, I want to know what you think. What have you seen of the Dallas Stars this playoffs?
I think obviously all 4 lines are stepping up. That's obviously a big part of it. You got to have every line producing. But most importantly, Wyatt Johnston. I don't know if you've seen him. He's about
great.
My age, or he just turned 21. I think Tuesday. He has 11 goals in the playoffs total. I think he has 7 this playoffs. Something crazy. I think they said he was on a record with Gretzky, most goals before turning 21 in the playoffs. Something crazy. So he having a player like that who's that young, and he's just going to be nasty for probably the next 20 years. Dude,
he's got 7 goals in the playoffs, so you nailed that. And obviously had a big game-winning goal. I think it was I can't remember what game it was against Vegas.
Vegas, Game 3. They were down 2-0.
Yeah, he had an overtime goal, right?
Yes.
He was great, obviously, this whole playoff run. And depth is definitely the biggest thing with that team. I would agree with you. They have a deep roster, and even though Sagan didn't put up the numbers he once did at one point, having that talent around him, and obviously Jamie Benn, they have a lot of guys.
Joe Pavelski.
So they have a lot of guys that they can, obviously beat you with. And that's a huge thing. You need depth. I think that's the thing with the Bruins, too, is the Bruins have that 3rd and 4th line step up at moments. Those guys play hard, you know what I mean? I'm not blaming them for the reason why they lost the series, but if you have a 4th line that can step on the ice or 3rd line that can step on the ice, and even if they don't score, shift momentum by getting at least time in the zone, that's huge. And Dallas has done that very well. Very well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
definitely.
And I want to know what you think of that Game 7. So we got tomorrow Game 7, Canucks, Oilers. Who do you got winning that game?
That's going to be a barn burner, but I honestly, I don't know, to be honest. It's been very, very tight series. Every game, I think we saw games 4 and 5 were 2-2, and the last goal was scored with 30 seconds, both games.
Yep.
Unbelievable. But honestly, I think, I don't know about to last night, but games 3, 4, and 5, McDavid only had 1 point.
Yeah.
The Canucks have been just shutting him down. Or I don't know about shutting him down because he's still Connor McDavid. It's hard to exactly shut that guy down, but I've been not making him look like Connor McDavid.
Absolutely.
A few games.
Definitely, yeah. He's been struggling a little bit, scoring at least goals-wise, but that's because, obviously, Hyman's been stepping up. Just having him next to him definitely helps. Attention's on McDavid. And Draisaitl as well. Their power play is ridiculous. But the problem with them has been defense. The Oilers, which I had them winning it all in my predictions for the season again.
Too.
And goaltending, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's kind of what wins championships. I know that's a statement that's used a lot as defense wins championships, but, if you want to compete, you need at least a good goalie. Just like the NFL. You can't win with a subpar quarterback.
Yeah.
You need a QB.
Baseball with pitching. It's
Exactly.
They're the maestro. They kind of control. They can control. They're the only ones who can actually control the entire game.
100%. And I like Skinner. He's not a great goalie, but I like him. But I think if they could get a legit goalie, maybe Omar. Who knows if they trade for Omar? You never know. Throw him in there. That would be a different team, I think. Then maybe add to their defense, which I know they've tried to address it, but their defense is still an issue. But goaltending's definitely been the problem the last couple of years. And then obviously folding in big moments. Last year, they completely fell apart.
Very good.
Exactly. They completely fell apart last year. And then this year, it's been off and on. The Canucks have shown up in some games. Obviously, early on, the Canucks had their number.
Their goalie issues have been insane. They're on their 3rd string.
Yeah, I know. They don't get our boy Thatcher Demko, former BC guy. You're right. Demko, yep, you got it.
Demko, yeah.
Thatcher Demko, so he's a former BC guy. They don't got him right now. He's still hurt. So
yeah,
they've been all over the place with that, but they've been able to stay afloat. Which, if you look at their depth, they have a lot of guys who can score as well, which the Canucks, I guess that's the storyline in the playoffs. Depth and scoring, which they got a lot of guys. Brock Besser and Pedersen.
Mm-hmm.
They got a lot of talent.
Yeah. What did you think? Did you see that cross-check Game 4 on McDavid? What did you think? I don't know. If that would have, do you think that would have been called if it was any other player but McDavid?
I like McDavid a lot. I'm rooting for the Warriors in the series. I'm not going to say I'm complaining, but what would you say?
Well, not a suspension, but yeah.
You would agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that wouldn't have been called because, I mean, you saw Zach Hyman on the same play. He comes in and cross-checks the 6'8" defenseman. He doesn't really flinch. But Connor McDavid gets cross-checked from behind, a cross-check in the face. They're like, all right, we got to suspend one of them.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like, here's the thing. I get why they called it. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I do
definitely.
like if it was any other player, probably not a suspension if it's any other player. Kind of like, I guess, LeBron usually gets his calls in games.
All the big players, yeah.
Exactly. Giannis, Embiid, Tatum's even getting some calls more now than he did in years past. Brunson, exactly. So they get to the free throw line, those guys, and I guess same thing for McDavid there. He's going to get the benefit of the doubt. And I think the NHL knows you have to protect Connor McDavid just because of how much electricity he brings to the game.
Definitely. Zadorov, the defenseman for the Canucks, even said himself, the guy who cross-checked him from behind, he's like, yep, NHL's got to protect their investment.
That's what it comes down to, legitimately. And so here's the thing, I didn't see that game live.
At the end of the game.
Yes.
It was 4-3, ended, and then that's how it ended.
I said I'm rooting for Edmonton, so I was fine with it. But
yeah.
Which is the thing.
Obviously, to see a guy like Connor McDavid, you want to see him in the next round. You want to see him advance.
That's the thing. You want to see him advance, obviously, and at the same time, it's like maybe the referees are setting precedent too. Which that's what they tried to do in that Florida, Bruins game 2, where they try to send everyone out and kick everyone out. McAvoy and all those guys, Pastrnak and Kachuk. They kicked everyone out just to try to set precedent. But Montour, exactly. They all got kicked out, which it got pretty crazy, though. Like, the Bruins had 9 guys on the bench after that. It was nuts. It was nuts, dude.
It was like an 80s game.
It was ridiculous. How many guys got thrown out? It was 8 or 9 guys.
8 or 9, yeah.
8 or 9 in that third period.
I think it was 130 penalty minutes or something.
Yes. 130 penalty minutes. Multiple major penalties, obviously, each way. It was tough. Game misconducts. That's part of the game. The Bruins obviously knew they were going to lose, so they were just screw it. We'll probably just hit our way into probably next game, try to bring some momentum by, hitting them around. But it obviously didn't work. But
looking ahead to that series, who do you got in that one, Panthers or Rangers?
I'm going to go the Rangers. So I actually thought the Panthers were going to lose first round, so they've exceeded my expectations. I thought it was a hot take, but I thought the Lightning, with their experience, I thought maybe they'd have probably this year maybe one more run with that core maybe. So I thought maybe they'd try to make a run, and like they did in that 2019-2020 window and 2021 where they went, 3 years in a row. So I thought they were going to do that, and I thought they were going to go for a run, and then I thought they'd lose to the Rangers. So I had the Lightning losing to the Rangers. With the Panthers not winning that series, obviously now being in it against them, I'm still going to go with the Rangers, but I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it goes 7. I think it's going to go 7. What would you say?
I think I might have Panthers. I will. Just honestly, because of the president's curse, I feel like the best team always ends up choking somehow, and the Panthers were just there last year. I mean, I feel like they're just gonna come through. They just obviously, surprise. They were kind of a surprise with the Lightning. You could say they might have been a surprise with the Bruins. Obviously, they beat them last year, but they did lose to us all 4 times in the regular season, which I was kind of shocked how we kind of downplayed, but. I don't know. They're just always an underdog where you're never really expecting them to really do anything until these last 2 years. They're just they're like, hey, we're here. This wasn't a mistake.
I think they're built for the playoffs, just like the Minnesota Timberwolves, where their size and length and their defense, the Timberwolves are built for the playoffs. And then I'd say the same thing goes for Florida. Their physicality, obviously, their centers are good as well. They can beat you in multiple ways, whether they want to play a low-scoring game or a high-scoring game. They can win either one of those. They have multiple ways they can beat you, Florida, and they get in your head. That's the number one thing I'd say with Florida. They get in your head, and it works. It worked last year.
Of course, you take dumb penalties.
Exactly. They get in your head, and it works. I don't know. That Rangers series against Carolina, I thought was pretty scary. They went up 3-0. Oh, my God, dude, this is over. And then once it got to game 6, I was like, I guess you never know, dude. The way the puck bounces, it got pretty scary. What did you see in that series, though? Were you surprised Carolina went down 3-0?
A little bit, but I think Carolina, it seems like they always find a way to choke. It's one way or another. But I was shocked it honestly went 6. I mean, I was honestly, after it went 3-0, I was expecting a sweep because I think the last, every time they make the conference finals, they get swept. I think last year against the Panthers, they were swept.
Yep.
Like, a few years ago against us, they were swept.
Yep.
Made the finals. It's just like, I feel like, I don't know what it is with that team.
I would agree with you. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, though. They do find ways to lose, just like the Dallas Cowboys for that instance.
Leafs.
Exactly. Maple Leafs always find a way to lose. The LA Clippers, tough because I'm a fan of them.
Yeah.
They always find a way to lose, whether it's injuries or just guys, not shooting in the playoffs and playing and shooting the ball well, like we saw with Harden and Paul George struggling the last couple games against Dallas. Like, those teams find ways to lose. And I'll give you another one. The Tampa Bay Rays, Toronto Blue Jays, always find ways to lose when it matters in the playoffs.
Cardinals.
Exactly. Same exact thing. And I think the Carolina Hurricanes go in that same category of teams that find ways to lose. So, yeah, in that series, now we got the Rangers and obviously Florida. You're going to go with the Panthers probably winning this series, which I respect. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. It goes 7.
It's going to be a tight series.
I'm going to side with the Rangers just because I had them winning it all. I had them in the final, and I think I had the Orioles beating them. But I'm going to go with them winning the series in 7. What would you say?
I don't know. I mean, I think Panthers probably take one on the road in the first 2. I mean, I think they'll split first 2.
Yep.
I could see them maybe taking both in Florida, but I don't know. I'd maybe say Panthers in 6.
I would agree with that. I like that. I think it goes 6 or 7 no matter what, no matter who wins.
Yeah, definitely.
There will definitely be a dogfight. Which that Rangers team, as I said, though, we were talking about that game 6. They were this close to losing that game. They were. That third period was huge.
The Canes had plenty of chances to put it away.
Dude, they did multiple.
They had two easy ones right in front of the net. They could have tapped in.
100%. That's why it's hard, though. If you look at that game, you see 5-3, and you think, oh, the Rangers probably dominated. But no, they were down 3-1 heading into that third.
Chris Kreider went nuts in the third.
BC Eagle, Chris Kreider.
I was going to say, yeah.
Exactly. Three goals in that third.
I mean, I think he was the first since Messier to have a natural hat trick for the Rangers.
Yep. You got it right.
Yeah.
You got it right. That was a pretty wild game. If you look at that score 5-3, you think they probably got dominated, but the case was
period
they
got dominated.
Exactly. That third period, they turned everything around. The first 2 periods, they down 3-1, but they completely took things over in the third. I think, obviously, having momentum, once you tie the game and you blow that 2-goal lead, I think that team, most of the time, 90% of the time, loses. If you're up 3-1 and then it's 3-3, you lose 90% of the time because I feel like the momentum swings in a single game.
When I saw it was 3-1, and I saw the 2 Rangers players collide on that play, and then Aho had a breakaway. I was like, all right, here it is. Like, if he can seal it right here. And then when I saw the Rangers come back down and get a goal, I'm like, all right, it's looking shaky now.
Dude, the whole momentum flipped, and that was on the road too. I mean, they did that on the road, the Rangers, so it's not like they were playing in front of their home crowd and had the momentum that way, just having everyone into it when they tied it, for that matter. Won the game, obviously, 5-3. Shesterkin was huge in that game that I saw.
Yeah, he's been huge all playoffs.
He's been great, especially in that game, because that third period, like you said, Carolina had their chances, but he was great overall. He was. The whole playoffs, though, like you said. So I'm interested to see who wins that series. I'm going to go with the Rangers in 7. You're going to go with Florida in 6. As for that game tomorrow night, Edmonton, Vancouver, just wanted to get your pick one last time there. I'm going to roll with Edmonton winning, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be a 1-goal game in my eyes.
Same. I got to go Oilers. I feel like they'll get a few power plays, and their power play is just absolutely unstoppable. I mean, I think before Game 4, they had one in every single game or something like that. I mean, it's just... Yeah, it's kind of unfair, their power play. So
definitely,
I got to go Edmonton.
I would agree with you there. I know they're on the road, but I mean they did beat them on the road in Game 2. They lost that close Game 1 where they choked a couple games away.
Yeah,
they choked a couple games away. And I think, let me see the scores here. So they had Game 1 was 5-4. They lost.
They were up 4-1. Yeah.
Exactly, up 4-1, choked that, lost. Then they won 4-3 over Vancouver in Game 2. Lost Game 3, 4-3, which I think they had a lead in that one too, if I remember right. They were up 3-2, or they were up 1-0. They were up 1-0
in the first period.
Got it right, exactly. And then Game 4 they won 3-2. Then lost Game 5.
30 seconds left. Yep, and then Game 5 the other way around. 30 seconds left.
You got it right. Look at that. And then Game 6, they won obviously that one 5-1. So
that's right. Yeah.
Everything's been a 1-goal game except for that Game 6. So I think this is going to be another 1-goal game.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Edmonton winning. I'm going to go with the lowest scoring. I'm going to go 2-1. I think it's going to be more of a dogfight. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 5-4 game. I always tend to say high-scoring games since I think that's what the NHL wants. But I'm going to go with the low scoring. I think it's going to be 2-1. What do you got?
I'll say 3-1 with an empty net.
Okay, I like that. Now that's always good to do. Empty nets are always smart to throw in there because if they are up, they will have a great chance. Especially with it being a game 7, they're probably going to pull that goalie with 2.5, 3 minutes to go. It's not like it's regular season.
David on the ice.
Exactly. So they could pull the guy early, which would be big. So obviously we went through those series, and then let's say it is Edmonton versus Dallas. Who do you have winning that series?
I mean, I think as we established earlier, Dallas is just deeper. They just got a deeper core. They can roll all 4 lines. I mean, where Edmonton, I feel like they produce mostly on their power play. It's just you can't really rely on that as winning. I mean, obviously it's great to have, but it's tough to rely on that.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. They're really deep. We already mentioned guys like Sagan and Ben and Jason Robertson. Like, they just have a lot of guys that can beat you.
Ryan Suter. Jake Ottinger has been huge also.
Beat you guy.
Yep.
Beat you guy. So right down the road. But that's the thing. They are a deep team. I'd still say Edmonton just because I had them winning before, but I'm not confident, as I should say. I'm not confident in Edmonton beating them if they do win this Game 7. But if Vancouver does win, I think it could be still – it's going to be a series. I think it goes 6 games no matter what in that series. I think Vancouver can win a couple games against them, but I don't think Vancouver has what it takes to beat Dallas. The way Dallas is playing right now. Things could change, but the way Dallas is rolling right now, they've found a way to make things click from what I've seen.
Also, their coach has been huge. Pete DeBoer.
Yeah.
I think he's 8-0 in Game 7s, which is obviously huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just a guy, he's just – I don't know. He's all in. You can see the whole team's all in. That's what you need. You gotta have buy-in.
Definitely. You need that buy-in, 100% in the locker room, then on the ice, the fan base, everything goes in one there. Obviously, you gotta have faith and belief. So appreciate the NHL talk here. We'll flip and we'll talk some NBA. We got a couple Game 7s today. We'll talk about them really quick, and then we'll talk some Celtics and talk about who you'd rather play, whether it's the Knicks or the Pacers. So let's start with the first Game 7, which is just about a half hour from now. You have the Knicks and the Pacers going at it at MSG at 3:30. Who do you got winning that game? What have you seen in the series? You can answer either one of those.
I mean, I think the refs will help out the Knicks. I mean, I think I've been seeing since the beginning that it's probably going to be Knicks Celtics, where I feel like the writing's kind of already on the wall. When you see a Celtics Cavs series and a Knicks Pacers series, it's like, who does the NBA really want? Who do they want, Boston and New York, or do they want Indiana and Cleveland? It's like, I feel like it's kind of a no-brainer when you see they got Game 7 at MSG. I mean, I feel unless the Pacers play absolutely the best game anyone's ever seen from any team ever, I mean, I feel like it's a tough task for them.
Definitely. I would agree with you there. I think the Pacers, if they want to win this game, they're going to have to be up by 10 or 15 in the fourth, because if it's a close game, the Knicks are going to get those close calls at the end, or non-calls at the end, I should say, which we saw with Tyrese Maxey getting tackled in one of those games where they didn't call it, when Nick Nurse was calling a timeout, when the Sixers got possession. We saw it in the regular season, Detroit, when Asad Thompson tried to get a loose ball, and then he got tackled by, I think it was DiVincenzo, a no call. And then even in this series as well, there have been some tough calls.
The moving screen.
Exactly, yes. The tough call against Miles Turner that really penalized Indiana in that game. There were some tough calls against them so far. So I do think there is an MSG bias. I would agree with Reggie Miller, where it's like you're playing 8-on-5, since the refs are obviously going to side with probably the Knicks, which I get it. Boston, New York would be a huge series, media-wise, having to be the rivalry and all that.
MSG, TD Garden.
Exactly. So I think the Knicks will get the calls. That's why I think they win this game today. I would say I'm more of a fan of the Pacers just because I like probably more of those players. I like Miles Turner, Aaron Nesmith, former Celt, like him. Halliburton's fun to watch. The way his court vision is ridiculous, the way he can pass the ball around. And then I like Siakam. So
McConnell.
See, exactly. Dude, McConnell's been balling.
Yeah.
He's been balling. Like, he's been solid, dude. I would say I like the Pacers more just because of those players. Like, I like Julius Randle. Obviously, he's not playing. I like Anunoby. Like, he'll be playing today, and Josh Hart will be playing today. I like the way the Knicks play. I'm not going to take away from the way they play. Like, they do play a scrappy game, and it works. Like, I like the way they play. They hustle. They play defense. They give you all 45, 48 minutes, no matter how much time they're out there. And I know Thibodeau's, job is basically just say, go play all 48 minutes. That's what he does. But I would say this. I think the Pacers, they want to win. They got to blow them out and be up by 10, 15, 20 points. Because if it's a close game, the Knicks are going to get that MSG bias. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. And you brought up Aaron Nesmith. He's been absolutely huge in this series. I mean, those games in Indiana, he's made Brunson obviously not look like what he looked like in that first series against the Sixers. And I think I'm glad for Aaron Nesmith. I mean, obviously we know him as Celtics fans, but I feel like the rest of the NBA didn't really know him probably until this series, where it's like a guy like that on a low market team can step up in these moments and be here for the team.
Definitely. He's been great defensively, and I think the thing is with Nesmith, he didn't really have a role on the Celtics. He had a role, but it wasn't like what he has now. He's a starter.
He's a lot smaller. Yeah.
Exactly. He's a starter on that team. And for the Celtics, he probably was never going to fit into a full-time starting rotation. You know what I mean? He was never going to fit in with those guys we had, which he started, I think, a few games. I think it was 4 games with the Celtics in his first couple of years. But the last 2 seasons, he started 60 and 47 games for Indiana. That wouldn't have been the case in Boston. So obviously things worked out for him. Able to sprout, shot 42% from 3 this year in the regular season. His defense is good because he plays physical. That's what you need. He's only 6'5", but he plays a little bit bigger than that from when I watch him play. He's 6'5", but I think the way he gets in front of you and bodies you a little bit, I think that's what helps him. Plays a physical, defense. But if you look at that team, I think the biggest X factor is Siakam. I think you need Siakam to show up, especially if you look at that paint, which if Josh Hart's now banged up and OG Anunoby's banged up, these guys you can probably exploit a little, right? You know what I mean? So who would you say is the biggest X factor in this game? We'll start with the Pacers. I'm going to go Siakam. And then the Knicks, we'll get to in a second. But who would you say is the biggest X factor on the Pacers today?
Yeah, I would say it's probably also Siakam. I mean, in that 2019 run with Kawhi, I mean, obviously Kawhi was obviously the A, but Siakam was right there. And I mean, he went off in a few of those series and kind of competed with those really tough guys where, I mean, we haven't really seen as much of that since the Pacers. It's like, sometimes I even forget he's even on the Pacers. I'm like, wait, Siakam? I'm like, forgot. He was last year on the Raptors. And I'm like, oh, here he is. He's in the playoffs. He's still around. But it's like, yeah, as you said, he's got to step up. It's his time. It's Game 7. These are the moments that people live for.
Definitely. And he's won before, so I think that helps. Is obviously he's won before, so he knows what it takes to win. Having that guy in the locker room is huge. And also, I thought he was a great addition to that lineup. Adding him in, putting him at the 4. Obviously, having Miles Turner helps. Miles Turner is, I think, one of the most underrated players in the NBA. So having Siakam at the 4 definitely helps. I'd say I agree with you. He's the X factor there. Like you said, there's sometimes he doesn't show. There's sometimes you don't know he's on the floor. That can't be the case today, though. You know what I mean? The last couple games he shot well. 22 points to 25 points the last couple games. 7 to 15 from the floor, 11 to 21 from the floor. He has what it takes to definitely be that guy that can be the best player on the floor for them. It's just a question of whether or not he'll show up. As for the Knicks, I would say Josh Hart, but with him being hurt, it's tough to really say whether or not he'll be ready to go. He'll be playing, but I don't know if he's going to be 100%, able to keep up like he's been able to the whole series. Who would you say is the X factor over there in New York?
I would say OG Anunoby. I mean, I think it's just he's very inconsistent. One game it's 10 points maybe and has a few assists, and then one game it's 30 and he'll have 5 dunks over big guys And then he's been inconsistent, as I said, where it's just today it's just is he going to show up today? Is it going to be the 30-point Anunoby, or is it going to be the 10-point, 15-point Anunoby?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree.
That's a big question.
I would agree with that. I think the thing with him is like you said, he shows up some nights. He had 28 points in Game 2. Hasn't played since, though, so he's going to come in and be a little rusty. He's going to be rusty in this, so that's definitely a worry there for the Knicks. For the Pacers, though, in those first 2 games, they had a chance to win that first game. They were right there, obviously. And now they obviously turned the series around, going back to Indiana, winning a huge Game 6. I'd say momentum swings in the Pacers' favor, just being able to survive after basically getting a Game 1 thrown out of their hands. They didn't have a chance to win that game because of the refs. I think momentum swings their way, especially with the injuries the Knicks are dealing with. Randall being out the whole playoffs. Anunoby now being back, but he was hurt. Josh Hart being banged up. Brunson's not 100%. He's definitely hurt as well. So that's the thing. I would say it swings in the Pacers' favor, but I do think the Knicks win this game today. Although, as I said, I do like more players on the Pacers, I'd say. And I think the Pacers and the Celtics would be an interesting series. Like, the Knicks would be a good series because they play defense, they play physical. But the Pacers have an ability where they can outscore you and, and just outshoot you and beat you by 25. Then they have the nights where they don't play defense, which happens a lot with them. They just, score a lot. That's their game plan. But what would you say you would rather play as the Celtics? Would you rather play Indiana or would you rather play New York?
I'd personally want to play Indiana because, I feel like we just get more of those, as we said, the calls, like those close games. It's just like when it's Boston and Indiana, it's like, I feel like they're going to be a favor more towards Boston, where it's Boston and New York. It's like, it's a little questionable, obviously. I think New York probably is like one of the only places that has a bigger market than us, where it'll be a little bit tougher to compete.
Definitely.
This Knicks-Pacers series really reminds me kind of the Celtics and Pistons back in the day, where it was kind of like that 7-game series. I think it was 87 when the Celtics, they stole the ball at the end, Larry Bird, and he threw to Dennis Johnson in Game 5, where I feel like it's kind of the same thing. Like, the home team always won in that series, where it's kind of the same thing here. Like, I think Isaiah Thomas said after that game, he was like, that was our chance, Game 5, where I kind of feel like Game 1 was kind of their chance. Game 1 or 2, where those were really tight games, was kind of their chance in this series. He's like that goddamn leprechaun, like, just found a way.
Definitely. I would agree with you. Yeah, that series is very similar, a lot of back and forth, and the teams that were home always won. It was kind of like that Bruins-Canucks series even back in the final, when the Bruins, obviously, every team won those home games, and the Bruins won that Game 7.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
huge.
How did the Bruins win that game? They blew them out right away.
Yep.
They blew them out right away.
4-zip.
Exactly. What was the final score of that game? You remember?
4-zip.
4-zip.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay, 4-zip. So that's what the Bruins did to win that. Obviously, in the road, get the momentum right away, go up 4-0. I think the same thing goes to the Pacers here. If they want to win this game, they got to be up right away and be balling out.
Got to be similar to Game 4 or 6.
Exactly. They got to be balling out and be lights out from the floor, which their offense has been one of the best in the league all year because of their pace. Halliburton obviously pushes the floor, and having guys that can run as well, like Siakam, he can run. Neesmith obviously is a shooter, but they have guys that can get up the floor, and that helps with their pace, and that's why they scored a lot of points, every game this season. I think that has to be the case today. And with the Knicks being hurt, they got to take advantage of that. You know what I mean? They got to take advantage of that. So, who do you think wins this game? I'll let you give your pick.
I think as we've established, the Knicks will get the calls, and I feel like Brunson will have a good enough game to keep them in it. If not, like, go ahead by a lot. But I feel like, the Knicks just overall probably have the stronger team, and as we've established many times, they're going to get the calls down the stretch.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. I would agree with you. I think the Knicks win this game, especially if it's a close one. They're going to get those calls. The MSG bias is legit, and I think the NBA wants that. The NBA wants Boston, New York. I think even the NHL wanted it to some degree. I thought it would have been cool. The referees weren't showing that they wanted it, but I think there were NHL fans that wanted to see Boston, New York, in both.
Both
the
sports.
NHL, Eastern Conference Finals of both NHL and obviously the NBA. But we could potentially see a Dallas, which if the Mavericks were to get past Denver or Minnesota, we could see Dallas versus Boston, Dallas versus New York in each, which is probably not going to happen, but
that would be cool.
There is a possibility. There is a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Celtics are the best team in the East, which we'll get to them in just a second, but I don't think that will happen, but I think that would be cool. If two teams could play each other in the same sport, in the finals, I think that'd be pretty sick. Or at least in the Eastern Conference Finals, which the Bruins had their chance, would have been great. But so I would agree with you. I think the Knicks win this game. I think it'll be a close one. As for the other Game 7, Denver, Minnesota, who do you got there, and what have you seen in this series? Which it's been a lot of just blowouts. It seems like I don't really know how to sum this series up. I don't know, because when it was 2-0, I thought the series was over with, and I thought, okay, Denver's going to probably win one game, maybe two, and they lose in 6. Denver won 3 in a row. Obviously, Minnesota has a huge Game 6, blows them out. And here we are now in Game 7. What have you seen in this series?
As we said, it's been obviously a lot of blowouts. I think from the beginning, Game 1 was obviously pretty close. Game 2 and 3, blowouts both ways.
Yep.
I don't really know. I think the games, Minnesota, everybody really has to show up, I realize, for them to win. Where it's like, I feel like with the Nuggets, it's kind of like if Jokic, Murray, and like Michael Porter Jr., if they all, I mean, I feel like Denver just has more depth overall, where they can rely on the deeper guys, but they have those top guys. If those top guys do their role, I feel like they win easily. Where Minnesota kind of like just has to all like go insane.
Definitely. I would agree with that. I think, like you said, Michael Porter Jr., he's a guy that has struggled. There's 4 of his last 5 games, he's had single-digit points. The last 5 games, 9, 21, 4, 6, 8. 8 last game, 3 of 9 from the floor, 2 of 10 the game before that. He's really struggled. I'd say he's my X factor there for Denver because he hasn't really shown up. They need 15, 20 points out of him just to have that third option that can still give you double-digit points. He hasn't been that guy except – I believe it was maybe game 2 it was, or game 3. Game 3 he had a really good game. Mm-hmm. But besides that, he hasn't really shown up.
Kind of similar like Anunoby, where they're just inconsistent. You don't know which version of him is going to show up. It's like, is he going to drop 20 to 30, or is he going to drop below 20? Like, that's the question. Where, I mean, Minnesota, I mean, I think also, I'm leaning towards Denver because I feel like a lot of the time when you see a game 6 like that, where it's just like a blowout, like they kind of just used like all of their energy, I feel like, in that game. And they're kind of, now they got to go back to Denver where, I mean, obviously elevation with a guy like Anthony Edwards, he says he doesn't feel it because, I mean, he's probably just because he's so young. I mean,
yeah.
But a lot of these guys, I feel like Rudy Gobert hasn't really been able to keep up with Jokic. Exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's why I'm going to go with Cat as my X factor there for Minnesota. And that's because obviously in the paint, Cat can beat you shooting the ball. He can shoot a little bit. He can shoot the 3, which he's been great at the last few years. I know he considers himself, one of the best 3-point shooters as a big man ever, which he is a consistent shooter. He can shoot if you leave him open. So I'm going to say he's my X factor, obviously, in the offensive end. And then defensively, I know he's not a defensive, a big man. He's not going to, wear you down in the paint. But I think his defense has been better because he has Gobert in the paint. Gobert can take that big man against him. He can take the 4. Exactly. So I'm probably going to go with Cat as my X factor over there. But I think the X factor for Minnesota is their bench. Because you look at Denver's bench, I think they had 6, 7, 9 points in that game. 6, where they lost 115-70, lost that game by 45 points, the biggest loss ever for a reigning champion in the fall. I think it was an MVP, a reigning MVP, which Jokic won. 45 points, the biggest loss, biggest deficit, a team's ever lost by with the reigning MVP in the playoffs. So I would say it's the bench, I would say, for Minnesota, because they have ways they can beat you with those guys off the bench. Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, those guys play their role very well. Jaden McDaniels, I know he stops, but he plays his role very well. And if McDaniels can shoot like he did last game and have, 3 threes and have 21 points, I think Minnesota wins this game. If they can have that bench that comes in, plays with an edge, plays their role like they always have, I think that's the difference there for them. And I'd say Cat as well, because if Cat can shoot the ball like he did, like I think last game he struggled, if I remember right, but earlier in the series when they won those first 2 games, he was great. So I think that's my X factor there. But who would you say wins this game? You're siding with Denver probably?
Yeah, I think I lean towards Denver just because, as you said, I mean, their bench is obviously better in Minnesota, but as I was kind of hinted at earlier, they all kind of have to like go off. I feel like kind of have like that big lead as we saw in Game 6, where it just got to like what is even going on. Where I feel like a few of those guys won't kind of had their peak last game, and they're kind of a little more nervous for Game 7. They don't have exactly the same energy going on in the away arena. I mean, against the defending champs. I mean, obviously it's tough, and I think for Denver, I think they've kind of just have a clean slate after last game. Where last game they can kind of just look at it and be like, all right, it's 3-3. Now it's down to 1 game. I mean, at the end of the day, we all look at that now and say that was a huge blowout, but they don't win this game. I mean, it ends up really meaning nothing.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all 1 game, like you said. It all comes down to this. The other 6 games don't matter. It's just you got to win 1 game. Denver being home definitely helps. Gives them an edge. But I would say this, like, with Minnesota, though, they have an X factor that, as a team, with their hustle, their defense, their size, their length, they can show up any game and be in it just because of their defense, which is huge. If they can shoot the ball like they have in some of their blowout wins, they're really hard to beat. So I'm gonna roll with Minnesota, but I think it'll be a close game. But Denver's won for a reason. Last year they were very good. They had depth though. Last year they had obviously Bruce Brown, they had Jeff Green. They don't have that anymore. But I'm gonna roll with Minnesota. I'm gonna go with them there. So you got Denver, I got Minnesota. Now let's turn to the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics have had a great run, which it's not their fault, the injuries they've had to play against. Jimmy Butler, Rozier being out, Rozier and Butler being out first round. Mitchell, Jared Allen, then LeVert in the last game. It's not the Celtics' fault. They're not picking who they play against, but it has helped at least a little bit where they can win series early and get Porzingis back healthy. So you'd rather play Indiana, you said. And if you look at this series coming up, no matter who they play, if the Celtics were to lose, let's say the first game or two, do you think they'd rush back Porzingis?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if we play the Knicks, I feel like Porzingis will be wanting to come back. Like, I feel like I've been thinking, like, if we play the Knicks, like, Porzingis is going to come back with, like, a vengeance. Like, he always seems to go off against the Knicks. Like, you know, any team that, like, he played against formerly, like, he always just seems to have, like, an extra step to him, those games.
Definitely. I would agree with you. I think if the Celtics were to lose, like, game 1 or 2, like they did the last couple series, losing game 2, I think in both of them, I don't think they'd rush it back if it's 1-1. But if the Celtics were to lose 2 games, I think then they'd rush it back. But I don't see that happening. I think the Celtics will be fine against either team. It'll probably go 6 games at most against either team. So I don't think they rush them back. I don't think they'll want to because they want them to be ready for the finals, whether it's Denver, whether it's Minnesota, whether it's Dallas, who knows. They're not going to want to rush them back because they want them to be able to be healthy, obviously, for that run. But with this Celtics team, how have you felt about the way they've played all season? Obviously, their game plan is take a lot of threes, play some defense, and just try to blow teams out with offense, which they don't really need to play much defense because they're up a lot of the time by 15, 20, it seems like. But what have you seen from the season this season?
I mean, as we've said, a lot of scoring. I mean, as we said, they shoot the 3 ball a lot. Most guys can hit the 3 in this day and age. A lot of them can, but when it's like all 5 guys can all hit 3s, it's obviously huge. Just having like those extra guys like Derek White, like those unsung heroes this year. Like Derek White was obviously a huge one. Drew Holiday. I mean, obviously his experience has been invaluable. Even Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, Peyton Pritchard, those guys coming off the bench. I mean, those guys will put up 15, 20 points some games. I mean, when you got all those guys produced in double digits, I mean, it's hard to beat.
Definitely. Yeah, Derek White has really surprised me. He probably, if you look at the numbers he had, obviously the scoring wasn't, which in the playoffs he's been great, but in the regular season I think he averaged, what do you average in the regular season, like 15, 16 points a game?
Probably around that, but his defense has been, that's one of the guys. His defense has been amazing. I mean, most blocks by a guard. I don't know when it was, but he had the most blocks by a guard or a point guard.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been unreal.
Dude, he's been great defensively. That's why I think the All-Star game for him, I know he didn't make it. At the time, I was like, Derek White's not an All-Star. But then, like, now that you look at it, both ends, I mean, there's not many players doing what he could do on both ends.
Yeah.
You know? And I know he's a better defensive player than he is offensive, but he can still give you buckets. He can shoot.
Definitely. And we saw that against the series in the Heat. I mean, that game 3, I remember you were just seeing memes everywhere. It's like, Messi's going to leave this game thinking Derek White's the best player ever. Like,
dude, it was legit, though. Like, he was lights out. Yeah. He was lights out that game. What did he finish with, 38, was it?
Yeah, something crazy.
I think 38. And that's the thing. It's like the Celtics have a million guys that can do that to you, though. They have Tatum, Brown, White. Drew Holiday can even give you, which Drew's not taking enough shots to get 25 points, but he could still be a 25-point-per-game scorer, Drew Holiday. At least a 20-point-per-game scorer, I think. Al Horford, Porzingis, they have a lot of guys that can put up 15, 20 points, and that's why they're so hard to beat. Because if Tatum has a bad night or Jalen has a bad night, they have 3 or 4 other guys that can make up for that. You know? So I think if the Celtics, which they should get through this East, if they lose in the finals, it's a disappointment, but I wouldn't say the season's a failure. If they lose in the Eastern Conference Finals to either team, it's a failure. They need to make it to the finals, and they need to at least make it 6 or 7 games no matter who they're playing against. With that being said, this team is the best team overall in the NBA, probably. Probably overall. 1 through 5, when everyone's healthy, that starting lineup, probably the best in the NBA. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think
if you just look at pure roster and talent, yes. But, I mean, the only team I'm really nervous about is the Nuggets. I mean, I feel like losing twice to them in the regular season, the only 2 times we played them, and it feels just like Porzingis and Al Horford can't exactly just guard Jokic. It's like, I mean, it's very tough. I mean, and I think their thing is where other teams like the Sixers with Embiid and Giannis, like the other teams don't really have is they don't have as many like spot up shooters. Where Denver kind of they all collapse on Jokic, and then there's like all 4 guys around the perimeter can shoot for a 3. Where it's like with the Sixers and it's only really like Maxey or as much and
Nick Batum.
Yeah, exactly.
My buddy Batum. And Buddy Hield fell out of rotation in Philly. That was crazy.
It's like the Sixers, I feel like you can't rely all 5 guys exactly on the floor, where it's like Denver, it's like any guy on the court, any guy off of Jokic, they can all shoot. Like
definitely. And that's the thing with Jamal Murray. That's why it works.
Mm-hmm. My cousin?
Yeah, Jamal Murray, exactly, your cousin. You got it right. J-Mer and B-Mer.
Yep.
That's it right there. But yeah, no, you're right. They can shoot. And obviously they play defense. They play well as a team. They don't have the depth that they had before, but the guys that are on the floor together, like they do play their role well. Aaron Gordon knows to play his role well. Get boards, play defense, shoot the occasional 3 every now and then. KCP, you like KCP?
No, I said the BC man, Reggie Jackson.
Reggie Jackson, okay, my fault. You cut out for a second. I thought you said, when you said KCP, I thought you said BC. When you said BC, I thought you said KCP.
But yeah, him also. Definitely.
KCP too, though. I get you.
Christian
Reggie Jackson,
Brown.
though. I like Reggie. You're a Reggie fan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw him when I was younger at BC, like probably 10, 15 years ago.
15, yeah.
Yeah.
15 years ago. What a legend, though. He made a great career in the NBA, and I'm hoping he gets a ring.
Was he not on the team last year? No.
Well, he was. You're right. He was, because the Clippers got rid of him. We traded him for Mason Plumlee at the deadline.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really?
And then he got cut by the Hornets, and then he went over to Denver, did win. You're right. You got it right. I just forgot that because I was thinking he was with the Clippers last year, which he was, but he was in Denver as well. But you're right. He did get a ring already, and he deserves it. I mean, he's a veteran that's played his role in the NBA for so long. 12 years now in the NBA, so 10 to 15 years ago, you were right about that. He was at BC at that time, so you got that right.
He just fall up.
Dude, he was a beast. That was the last time we went to the tournament. March Madness with him.
Really? Wow.
With him, yeah. Quite a legend, isn't he? But so that's obviously a great series there. So no matter who wins this game tonight, I think they beat Dallas. Even though Dallas has played well, I think they beat Dallas. What have you seen with them, though, the Dallas Mavericks?
I mean, obviously, Luka's been going crazy, but also I think in this last series against the Thunder, it's been P.J. Washington is going nuts. I mean, I think games 2 and 3, he had like 30 points. Or the Mavs, they just kind of last night even we saw like close games. They just find a way to win. I feel like they can just hit their free throws. They can get through those tough games.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's the thing with them is they have depth too. And size, that's what hurt the Clippers is in the paint. Gafford was good, and then they also had P.J. Washington at the 4. Lively, exactly. So they matched up well with the Clippers, and the Clippers didn't match up well with them. It was just better for Dallas' side. And Kyrie has his moments when he's the best player on the floor. Still one of the most talented players in the NBA. What'd you say?
It seems like he didn't do as much in this series.
Not this series. The Clippers series, he was probably the best player overall in that series. He was great defensively, which isn't really his game. Neither is it Luka's game, but they both played well defensively against the Clippers. I would agree with you, though. I think their size, Derek Lively's been great, and they all play their roles well, which it seems like that's a thing with every team that's been good in the playoffs, NBA, NHL, they play their roles well. Mm-hmm. That's what you got to do. You have to have teams that gel together and everyone knows their role. But I think Minnesota or Denver, I think they beat that team. Would you agree?
Dallas, yeah, I would agree. I think they're just more compact. They have more depth, I'd say, on both Minnesota and Denver. And they're probably just more athletic and probably more team. They're more of a team where I feel like the Mavericks kind of go through Luka basically every game. I feel like that's Luka's problem. He doesn't really know how to play without the ball. It's like, I mean, we see him try to dish out to P.J. Washington once in a while, but I feel like he always tries to be the man. He doesn't really let anyone else kind of like take over the game.
Yeah, I would agree. That's the problem I'd say with he and Kyrie, I wasn't that big a fan of that duo just because I thought that would be an issue, both of them needing the ball. But Kyrie can play a little bit off the ball, not as much as Luka can. More than Luka can. Luka can't play as much off the ball as Kyrie can. So that's obviously what has worked, Kyrie playing off the ball. And they have their moments. They both take their shots. Obviously Kyrie has his ISO moments. That always happens. But they have found a way to win, and obviously their defense has been a huge part of that. And also they have depth. I mean, that's huge. So one last thing I want to mention. So let's say it is Celtics versus Denver or Minnesota. Who would you rather play between those two teams? Probably Minnesota, it seems like.
Yeah, I would probably say Minnesota because I feel like, again, with the calls, I mean, that's obviously a big part of it. And Minnesota doesn't have that experience. This is probably their first year being like this great of a team. I mean, it seems like obviously they'll be in the mix in the coming years with a guy like Anthony Edwards this young. I mean, the guy's been going crazy, but as we said, they don't have that experience where Denver was just there last year.
Definitely. You're right. That's a good point. They do have the player of experience, Denver, and obviously they have the best player in the NBA most games, Jokic, just because of what he can do on both ends. And obviously what he's doing, passing the ball. It's ridiculous the way he can find guys.
Yeah.
It's been great. One last thing I want to mention before I let you go. I know that game's starting in a second. That's the Patriots, really quick. Drake Maye, how'd you feel about the pick?
I thought I liked it. I mean, obviously, we were looking at the quarterbacks. It's been obvious that we were going to get a quarterback from the beginning. I mean, and he was probably the best option at that point with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams going as the first two. And, I mean, he looked good at a place like UNC. I mean, UNC, obviously, nobody really looks at them. And it's like, oh, I want to watch North Carolina. Like, maybe for basketball, but not for football. But
basketball or baseball, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, he made North Carolina relevant, and I mean he was right there. I think he was top in the Heisman. I don't know if he was exactly top 3 or anything, but he was there like every year. He was always being talked about.
Yep.
And so I mean it's worth it. Give him a shot. He's young. I mean, people are saying he might be another Mac Jones, but I think the difference is Mac Jones had such a stacked roster in college where you could just throw it, you can just launch it to anybody, and it's like someone's going to come down with it.
Yeah, Devontae Smith and Jameson Williams and all those guys.
Whoever it is, it's like Henry Ruggs.
Yeah, they had talent. They had talent. When he was throwing the ball at Bama, Devontae Smith, and I know he didn't really throw much to – Jalen Waddle was there as well. He didn't throw much to Judy and Ruggs because I think it was Jalen Hurts at that point, and then he came in the next year. But he was there with them. Obviously, he was there with them in the same locker room. And then obviously if you look at Drake Maye, the mobility – he can move. Mac Jones really can't move much out of the pocket, So that helps. And also he's young, so he's going to have time to develop. I would say the best thing the Patriots can do is let him sit the first 6 weeks. It's a tough schedule to begin. Let him maybe start week 7, week 8. After they come back, I think it's from Europe they have a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
After they come back from that trip, maybe start him in that next game. What would you say? Would you sit him the whole season? Would you start in week 1 or start in week 7?
I mean, I think you start him probably. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends, honestly, how he does in the preseason, to be honest. I mean, I think that's a big telling tale. Like, are they really ready to play against grown men, like, every single week? Or do they kind of need a little more time to develop are they still, like, kind of in that college mindset where they're playing against everybody their age? It's a big hurdle, obviously, going from college to pro.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I think you see how he does in the preseason. If you feel he does well and he's getting out of the pocket, being able to scramble around them, I mean, you can maybe start him week 1. But if he's getting cracked every play and has to come out every play, I mean, yeah, you maybe wait it out.
I would agree with that. I think the offensive line and maybe how the weapons play to begin the season, that could factor into whether or not he goes in at a certain point. Which if the offensive line's bad, they might not just say, hey, let's throw him into this and get him killed, and get him hit. That's why I think Brissett's huge. Brissett's a veteran. He's played a lot of games. I think he's better than people give him credit for. I'm not saying he's a star, but he's a respectable quarterback. Like, he's not a bad bridge quarterback. I don't mind him as a bridge guy. And the Patriots aren't in a position right now to win a Super Bowl this year, so I don't think it's that big of a deal having Brissett start. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it helps, obviously, having a guy that they planned on having as the bridge guy no matter who they got in the draft. Brissett was probably going to begin the season no matter what, and then they'll see how things go. But I'm excited for the Patriots. I think this era, obviously a new era, it's going to take probably a year or two, but if they figure things out and they hit on these draft picks they just had and hit on next year's draft picks, who knows what it'll look like 2 years from now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts on a guy like Malik Nabers? I mean, obviously he's huge.
Dude, I was a huge fan of the pick. I was happy we didn't go with the quarterback. I thought there was a chance. I was leaning towards them taking a receiver, but I did know there was a chance it could go QB, which I know the reports were we wanted to trade up with the Patriots. I know you guys didn't want to, but there were some reports we were trying to. But I was happy with the Nabers pick. We haven't had a receiver with 1,000 yards since Odell. Haven't had a wide receiver one since then, and Odell never played with Daniel Jones. So that means Daniel Jones has never had a wide receiver one in his entire career with the Giants. And I know a lot of people are down on him. I still have faith in Daniel Jones. I think you got to give him a wide receiver one, which now he has. And the offensive line, it's not great. It's never going to be perfect. I know every quarterback, most of the time, does not have a perfect situation. Brock Purdy did have a very fortunate situation he stepped into. That's not the case with every QB. But Daniel Jones, a tough quarterback, has battled back from a lot of adversity. He's finally getting a chance with the QB one, with the wide receiver one, I should say. So I'm excited to see what he could do. How did you feel about that pick for the Giants?
I think it's huge. I mean, I saw him at LSU a few times last year. I mean, Jaden Daniels and him were just throwing bombs. Like, it would just be like you'd go 50 yards deep, like just throw a Hail Mary, just no problem. So, I mean, I think it's definitely, as you said, Daniel Jones has never really had a wide receiver one. So this is a new opportunity for him.
Definitely.
Have a guy like Malik Nabers who's just catching from the Heisman.
Definitely. I would agree with you. I think that's the thing with Mac Jones even. He never really had that top receiver for the Patriots. And the same goes now for Drake Maye. Like, they don't really have that number one for him, which I know they drafted some guys in the draft, which is great. I actually do like what you guys took. That Washington receiver was at the second round. You took Jalen Polk. I like him. I think he could be a solid receiver. But I think you need a wide receiver one if you want to have a quarterback that can compete today, especially put up numbers that, guys in the NFL have, like Joe Burrow and all those guys. Once Burrow got Jamar Chase, he obviously had T. Higgins at that point, but once he got Jamar Chase, that elevated the offense. I'm hoping that adding in Malik Nabers could have the same effect. We'll see. But Speaking of LSU, though, one last thing. You were the first person that was a Joe Burrow fan that I knew.
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew.
I mean, I just remember he was able to beat Alabama, and nobody ever really beat Alabama. It's just like, if anything, it was going to be, you knew he was going to go off. You knew he was a Heisman winner. Once you beat Alabama, you're basically like guaranteed to win the Heisman and probably win the national chip too.
Dude, you knew. I remember the first person that was like, dude, Joe Burrow. I think it was you and then my buddy Mark Walsh. He loves him too, but you were the first one. First one.
I just remember him and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. I mean, it's probably, now that we look back at it, it's probably one of the most stacked college rosters ever.
I would agree with you. Yeah, that lineup was ridiculous.
That Alabama team from a few years ago.
Alabama, they had Najee Harris and all those guys,
Yeah.
even years before that, Calvin Ridley and all those receivers they've had over the years. It's like ridiculous.
Back on that team.
Exactly. Like, dude, it's crazy.
Florida team, obviously Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow, yeah, they had a squad back then too. The Pounceys. They had a good squad, though. You're right. Those are some of the most talented teams all around. And they won some national championships.
Cam Newton as a backup, right?
Cam Newton as a backup, yes. We're talking about all these teams that have won, though. They've all won. That LSU team won that we're talking about. That Alabama team with Mac Jones won. And then even that Florida team did, too.
Yeah.
So, all winning squads. But, hey, don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know Game 7 did just start. Thank you so much, Brendan. Truly a pleasure having you on today. Thank you.
Yeah, bro. I know we've definitely been waiting a while to do this. I'm glad we definitely got it done.
My brother, hey, BCCS baseball legend. Right there, Brendan. How many championships did you win? One or two?
I won one.
One. Okay, same as me. MCSAO champion, just like me, which I love. It was always a pleasure, obviously, being on your team and seeing you guys win afterwards was great. But thank you so much, dude. Truly a pleasure, and I'll definitely have you on again sometime soon. Whenever you want to jump on, maybe NBA Finals, you want to come on, you let me know. We'll find a time.
Sounds great. I'd love to be on again. All right, I'll see you.
See you, brother.